Good evening, friends. I extend a very warm welcome to all of you to another segment of Usana's Dialogues. And today we are going to discuss a very interesting and a critical issue. That's the India-China reset in relations, navigating strategic challenges and opportunities. Life is strange and it's full of surprises. Geopolitics is even more stranger. And these days, what we are getting to see around us, these are completely unexpected, and always it never ends to surprise us, and it never ends to spring more surprises, completely unexpected and beyond our expectations. That's what we see. China and India, back in 2020, they had a major clash in Galwan, and it seemed that everything has just come to a major standstill and things are worsened. But just 6 years after that, things are on a different track. And when Donald Trump came to power, many Indians celebrated that we have a person in America in power who is favorable to the Indians and who thinks good about India, and he's going to take major actions against Pakistan. But then things again turned quite differently, contrary to our expectations. And today we see India and China coming closer to each other, and that's why we have brought this very interesting panel. Before I introduce our expert and eminent speakers today, I would like to mention that while analyzing geopolitical issues, there are fundamental things which we can always look at. And in fact, I wrote in the American portal National Interest 3 articles last year, one was about the India-US relationship, in which I categorically mentioned that despite all this noise about India-US being natural allies and convergence of interest and everything, there is some big deficit at a certain mental level, emotional level. There's some kind of a big deficit, and that makes that actually prevents the comfort which is required and the trust which is required in building a robust relationship. But the US enjoys that kind of comfort, that trust with the Pakistani army because of their Cold War, because of their great friendship since the Cold War days, and against all the odds which the Americans have faced in Afghanistan, Pakistani army supporting terrorism and all, the relationship still survives and continues to thrive because of that very basic level of that comfort, trust, which can also be called invisible in this domain of geopolitics. Between Russia and India, another second article was on India and Russia. So I mentioned that there is a very strong civilizational partnership, and this is like a long-lasting relationship. So even beyond these little small hiccups in which India coming closer to the US, this relationship is going to survive because they have no permanent or no, I would say, long-lasting disputes with India besides minor geopolitical friction. But this relationship is it's very strongly grounded. Between India and China, the two countries have never fought in the history of 2000 years, except there were 2 minor incidents. One was during the time of Tughlaq, and I think one was in the 8th or 9th century when the Chinese supported some local princelet in India. But beyond that, there was no case of any direct confrontation between the two countries. But in fact, the two countries are great civilizational friends, or India, the connections pertaining to Buddhism, civilizational ties and all, they were very strong between India and China. So we always thought that what is the reason for this kind of conflict with Pakistan or with the Islamic countries? Certainly there were many reasons, because of that history of conflict and the history of I would say Islamic invasions in India over the last 1,000 or more than 1,000 years. But with China there was no such occasion. So so it was always expected that the two countries would ultimately would ultimately become friends. But then the geopolitical rivalry, certainly it always factored as a very paramount idea, and both the countries, like among the intelligence circles and the strategic circles, were being projected as geopolitical rivals. So amidst all these, I would say, confounding and confusing narratives, today we have India and China coming closer to each other. Definitely all this started as a reaction to Donald Trump's imposition of tariffs. But there are other voices saying that this kind of rapprochement has been happening even before that. Last year also, in 2024 October, the two foreign ministers met, and we started this process of engaging each other again. So now we have to see that whether this new kind of, I would say, rapprochement and this new engagement between India and China is it some sort of a short-term thing? Is it just India's tactical maneuver to signal some sort of displeasure to the US, or it's something which has a more long-lasting or a substantial geostrategic implication? So to discuss that, we have brilliant experts today with us. We have Ambassador Ashok Kantha. He's an amazing East in the Ministry of External Affairs and former Indian ambassador Indian ambassador and High Commissioner, Indian ambassador to China and High Commissioner to Sri Lanka and ambassador to Malaysia. Then we have Dr. Antara Ghoshal Singh. She is a fellow at Strategic Studies Program at the Observer Research Foundation. We also have Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar, who will be joining very soon. He's the former Indian ambassador to Kazakhstan, Sweden, and Latvia, and executive council member of the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. And then we have Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, who is also the advisory board member of Usana's Foundation, our mentor and one of the most prolific writers on geopolitics, and again, a great inspiration for the young and budding IR scholars, and also a great support and a great friend of young scholars. So very warm welcome to all of you. The session will be moderated by Ambassador Anil Trigunayat. And from here, I will not take much time. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Abhinav, for organizing this very highly interactive session. And I am so happy that Ambassador Ashok Kantha accepted our request to join us today, because personally I feel that I've not seen anyone who has such tremendous depth as far as India-China relationship is concerned. All of us are bystanders and try to watch and see what is happening, but he has lived through it. He's following it on a daily basis, and I have heard him tremendously. So we are really grateful. We are also very thankful that we have Dr. Antara Ghoshal with us, who is a very well-known researcher, and of course Ambassador Ashok Sajjanar, who can bring other perspectives as well. You can't dispense with your neighbors. That is the truism. And when you have a powerful and bigger neighbor, you got to learn to deal with it. So in my view, what we have been, as they say, that 1962 really brought us out of the stupor, and the 2020 brought us out of the complacency. Now that is something, and since then we have already got 5 years after Galwan. There have been efforts made by both sides, but India has essentially followed the 4D policy, basically dialogue, diplomacy, dehyphenation, and finally how to bridge the distrust. It is not going to go away, it will remain there, and that's what we are witnessing nowadays. Since the Kazan summit between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, it was decided and the principles of cooperation were laid out, and there have been several interactions, including the last one, which was Wang Yi's visit to India 2 weeks, in fact, or 10 days or 2 weeks before the summit level discussions, and there was a WMCC meeting that was also held during this. And what we saw in Tianjin basically was not something that was driven by the US, but driven, in my view, by our pragmatism on India's foreign policy choices. Because irrespective of the fact, whatever we may do, we have to learn to work with China, which has become our second largest trading partner. And at one time, even for our innovation, Innovate India program, I mean, they were the key investors. And ever since we curtailed the Chinese investments, there have been some stress that has been seen in our in that domain. So I believe that this particular summit was extremely important. More importantly, both sides were trying to send signals that we are here, and Chinese were more than, going out of the way to present a good side of them. And of course, they say that we are vital partners, civilizational, and all that came out. But look at Prime Minister Modi's statement was also equally very reassuring rather, in which one of the things he said that let us not look at each other as from the third country prisms. Like China looks at India from the US prism, And of course, now today Trump is nobody's prism, rather everybody's prism. So it's different. So whereas India always considered the Chinese designs in Pakistan, can they be left behind? I doubt very much. Then other dimension was of course Russia, because Russia's policy has been that it does not want to see disputes between India and China to the extent that they can't work with them. For them, both China and India are strategically extremely important. I always say that they need China to counter the West and they need India to counter China. Now, so to that extent, the Russians want, and there is a talk of revival of the RIC at the summit level, and that famous moment when all three of them were chatting away with their hands shake. I mean, a very, very positive uh, picture perfect as it's called, was shown and which gave certain signals. Now we don't know. I mean, 2 days ago or yesterday and today, if you see President Trump's messages, they convey a very different kind of a thing. Not only he's talking about Modi being his friend, but he's also talking about the trade deal is going forward and all this. So quite positive. Now, some people say that it is also because they don't want India to go to either of the clubs or go with China too much. 2 days ago, when the BRICS meeting, that was a special meeting, was held, in that one, Chinese ambassador here also said that India and China and Brazil and others should basically try to fight the Trump's tariff onslaught. I mean, that is something, again, we have to see and hear exactly how it plays out. So since we have Ambassador Kanta here with us, and I think that Ambassador Sanjanhar will join us much later. So I would like to request you, sir, to take the floor and share your thoughts, how you see this relationship moving forward, and whether the kind of confidence that is being displayed on all sides is justified. If not, what precautions are we trying to take, and to what extent are we going to go into it? Floor is yours, sir. Please unmute yourself, sir.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Well, thank you, Anil, for those kind words of introduction, and thanks to Sanas and Abhinav for inviting me to take part in this conversation. I think both Abhinav and Anil have raised some very important issues about where we stand in India-China relations, what's the nature of current thaw that we are witnessing in engagement with two countries, what are the drivers of that thaw? Is that being driven by bilateral, sort of dynamics, or two sides are being encouraged by, the changing geopolitical environment, especially pressures they're under from the USA to come closer to each other. I think these are some issues we need to address and see how we are likely to progress in the trajectory of India-China relations. The first point to note is that we are undoubtedly in midst of extreme turbulence and unpredictability in the global geopolitical landscape, which is leading countries to review and reassess their positions. For us, a geopolitical environment in which we navigate our relations with China has turned to a disadvantage for several reasons, but most important being kind of negative signals we are witnessing as emanating from Washington, D.C. Since Donald Trump returned to White House. Last couple of days, as Anil mentioned, there have been more positive signals, but basic facts haven't changed. So, in India, one strong pillar of our foreign policy, which was strategic engagement with the USA, is looking less formidable at this point of time. Now, to what extent that's resulting in current thaw in relations, I think we need to examine carefully. For me, I think one should be driven by empirical data. One needs to look at the timeline for improvement of relations. That is no doubt unfolding between two of the most populous nations in the world. And timeline, as I think Gavin also referred, Anil mentioned, this process commenced in the right earnest when Prime Minister met with President Xi Jinping at Kazan, Russia on 23rd October last year. And you recall that that meeting happened 2 days after two sides had agreed on disengagement of forces in Depsang Plains and Demchok, two areas which were proving to be difficult in terms of disengagement exercise. So that meeting at Kazan led to resumption of a process of re-engagement and rebuilding of relations between India and China, and it has progressed since then. You would have noticed that even prior to Wang Yi's visit to India, earlier this year, late January, Foreign Secretary had visited China, which was first meeting at the level of Foreign Secretary, Deputy Foreign Minister, and he also called on both Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Minister in International Department CPC, who has unfortunately fallen on bad times since then and is not to be seen any longer. Then we had visits by Raksha Mantri, External Affairs Minister and National Security Advisor to China, one after another. Though these visits were in context of upcoming SCO summit, which took place in Tianjin on 31st August, 1st September, there was a significant bilateral component as well. In fact, Dr. Jaishankar spent one extra day in Beijing prior to traveling to Tianjin for bilateral meetings, including with Vice President Han Chang and with Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and again, Minister for International Department of CPC. Then we see Wang Yi traveling to India on 18th, 19th, or was it 19th, 20th of last month. And that visit was substantive. He had 24th round of talks between special representatives with his counterpart, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, and had substantive discussions with EM and called on Prime Minister. And there we agreed on a 10-point consensus on how to proceed further, and also some important understandings were reached on the border issue. Essentially, what one got the impression that we are embarking on a dual track approach, where while we take different positions on centrality or salience of border related issues, China acknowledges that the border issue is returned to the center stage of India-China relations and needs to be addressed with a degree of urgency. So, we agreed to start discussions on disengagement, beginning with principles and modalities, and there was this enigmatic reference to early harvest in boundary settlement. I'll come back to that later. And earlier focus on people-centric contacts that we were comfortable with and which was making some progress, we added to the mix economic engagement. And this is the backdrop when the Prime Minister met with President Xi in Tianjin. The optics coming out of Tianjin visit to Prime Ministers are no doubt very positive. Not only bilateral but also in RIC, Russia-India-China context. That visual of Prime Minister with President Putin and President Xi, in fact, went viral. My own feeling is that, while Tianjin meeting was productive, no doubt about it, it gave further impetus to process of rapprochement, which was unfolding already. Looking at these developments as signs of a reset in India-China relations, let alone an RIC strategic troika emerging in response to shared concerns among three countries, India, China, and Russia, about the USA, will be far too premature. To my mind, while there is shared desire in both New Delhi and Beijing to project relationship in more positive light, to seek, an accelerated normalization, rather accelerated progress towards normalization of relations. All the, the perennial hardy structural problems in relationship remain unattended. They're still there. They continue to drag down the relationship. And I don't think in India there is any particular keenness to sort of project rapprochement with China as a kind of strategic compensation for stress and strain in our relations with USA. That relationship, India-US relationship, remains far more important for us. And, I think there is a strong desire in New Delhi, and I hope to a certain extent in Washington, D.C. as well, to bring that relationship back on track. But our problems with the USA will not be addressed going through Beijing, because Beijing remains our primary strategic rival. That fact has not changed. Now let's look at, actual state of relations today. As I mentioned earlier, there is no doubt about the fact that there has been a thaw in ties, which is most welcome. There is also progress in expansion of people-centric contacts, which is also most welcome, including decision to resume direct flights, facilitate visas, augment Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. I think all those are good developments. In fact, I would like to see more happening on that account, more in terms of contacts between two countries. Now, two sides would also like economic engagement to progress. Now, that is one area where I'm a little less confident about smooth progress in future, because if you look at trade data for first 7 months of 2025, asymmetry in our trade with China continues. In fact, our trade deficit continues to expand. Our dependencies on key imports from China are in fact becoming more and more serious, especially at a point of time when there is a proclivity among major countries, whether it's USA or China, to weaponize interdependence. You're aware what the USA did in terms of tariffs. They are basically trying to sort of leverage the demand to force others to make very unreasonable concessions. China also has weaponized, for instance, its very strong position in global supply chain on rare earth minerals, especially rare earth magnets. In fact, that became possibly the most important factor forcing Mr. Trump to move towards a trade truce with China. And he doesn't talk about sort of returning to tariff war with China at this stage. China did the same thing to India also. In fact, you're aware of how they denied critical exports to India, whether it be rare earth magnets or specialty fertilizers or tunnel boring machines or withdrawing Chinese nationals from Foxconn facilities. So I think concerns on that account and need for economic security vis-a-vis China. Sorry, I think someone needs to switch off.
Please switch off your mics.
Yeah, so that hasn't changed. So economic engagement, we can discuss in Q&A session later.
Right, sir.
Even to what extent investment inflows from China will help create real manufacturing capabilities in India and not just minor value addition without transfer technology is open to question. Coming to border issues, since that has returned to sort of center stage of relations, are my concerns about some unfinished business or disengagement, especially what was referred to in Parliament by EM as the steps of a temporary and limited nature, which essentially, constrain patrolling by Indian troops and grazing by Indian herdsmen in certain areas in eastern Ladakh they were visiting earlier. De-escalation hasn't progressed at all. Now we have agreed to sort of discuss principles and modalities, which are very important. We can come back to it during Q&A because this is really critical how we go about it. It's going to be a very complex process. Likewise, during Wang Yi's visit and 24th meeting of special representatives, the readout says that two sides have asked the expert group at the WMCC to explore early harvests. I don't know what is going to be scope of early harvest on boundary settlement, but earlier China had proposed early harvest limited to Sikkim sector, which we had rejected out of hand for reasons we can discuss later. So if you're returning to early harvest limited Sikkim sector, then some explanation is called for why we are changing our position. Now, coming to know China in a neighborhood, because that's a big concern, and that concern is getting aggravated in light of certain developments. One kind of role China played during our 4-day, sort of military conflict, or what you want to call it, with Pakistan from 7th to 10th May as part of Operation Sindoor. What happened this time was quite unprecedented because for the first time in India-Pakistan conflict situation, we had operational support being provided by China to Pakistan in different ways. So there was, aspect of battlefield collusion that has been publicly talked about by Deputy Chief of Army Staff, for instance. Then, of course, in our neighborhood, there is turbulence. Most recent development being what's happening in Nepal, which will make us a little more sort of even less secure or confident about our neighborhood and how to engage with China there. And finally, what I'll say that if you look at the broader strategic, outlook of two countries, their interests, how they look at, future of Asia, like if you'd like to see a multipolar Asia, whereas we are convinced that China would like to see a unipolar Asia, even though they profess to believe in multipolar world. And now we are concerned that China seek a hierarchy in Asia, with China being at the apex. It's something we are not very comfortable with. And there are a whole lot of other issues. I don't want to go into that. But bottom line is that how do we manage simultaneous rise of India and China, though at a sort of varying pace, where the capability gap between two countries becoming bigger and bigger? Is China willing to acknowledge interests, concerns, and aspirations of India as a co-ascendant neighbor? I think that is crux of the matter, and so far, nothing to indicate a change in Chinese position. There is a tactical reaching out by China. If you look at the Chinese media, that appears to be more a case of assessment that it's a moment of vulnerability for India. India is desperate. And the kind of pressure we were subjected to on Taiwan issue during Wang Yi's visit didn't leave a good taste in the mouth. I will stop here by just repeating that I think what Prime Minister conveyed to Wang Yi is the approach, what he conveyed, that we seek stable, predictable, and constructive relations with China. I think that should be our objective. At this stage, expecting that there will be a reset in relations will not be in alignment with facts on the ground, with objective realities, and not in keeping with the fact that there is a marked contradiction in outlooks, strategic outlooks of two countries, which remain very suspicious of each other. So let's not once again fall in that trap of being unrealistic, ignoring unpalatable facts, even while doing whatever is possible to seek that our relations with China come back on a more secure, stable, and predictable footing.
Thank you, sir, for such a detailed and insightful comments. What one gathers, and rightly so, that this is not a reset. This is merely a beginning of some kind of a rapprochement and trying to, I think, test the waters, basically. But moving forward, it was essential and it has happened. And you rightly mentioned that both RIC and thinking of a reset are somewhat premature. And as Prime Minister had said, and you reiterated, that a stable and predictable and secure relationship is what India is looking for. But of course, both have thought about it, that there should be some kind of modus vivendi, which should be mutually, as the mutual respect and mutual interest and mutual sensitivities have been often mentioned in interactions, will continue to move forward. And let us hope this time round China will understand. Of course, right now they are also making a lot of statements, and how true they are and to what extent, but going forward, thank you so much, sir. And now I'll request Dr. Antara Ghoshal to also talk about, apart from the bilateral relationship, that that the SCO, the Pakistani presence, before that, when Wang Yi was here, he also went to Afghanistan, Pakistan. And then there was another trilateral kind of a thing which happened after the SCO. So how do you see this particular relationship, which is also concerned to us, especially with regard to this 2.5 or two front war type of situation? Do you think that to what extent has it been calibrated or recalibrated or re-strengthened? Dr. Antara, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me for today's discussion, and it is really an honor for me to be a part of this very important panel. To give a brief background to my work, I study China's internal discourse, generally by scanning Chinese media, Chinese think tank publications, and other scholarly work. And Coming back to India-China relations, based on my study of Chinese literature, my understanding is that the Tianjin summit and the overall positive turn in India-China ties is not really a sudden development or a knee-jerk reaction to the current turmoil in international politics or the recent dip in India-US ties. If you look back carefully, as Ambassador Kanta also just mentioned, India-China relations have been showing signs of improvement since early last year, as both sides have been occasionally sending out positive signals to each other. Prime Minister Modi called for an urgent solution to the border stalemate in a magazine interview in April 2024. And this was followed by China deputing a new ambassador to India after 18 months gap. Then this was followed by October 21st, India-China reaching an agreement on patrolling arrangements along the LAC. In areas like Depsang and Demchok, and finally the big summit between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi in Kazan, Russia. And after that, as we have seen, high-level exchanges between India and China gaining momentum, aiming to restore normalcy in bilateral ties. As I gather from Chinese sources, the border patrol agreement has been the key icebreaker in bilateral ties. As we know that since the Galwan clash of 2020, India has been consistently demanding that Chinese army withdraw to the position before pre-2020 and restore India's patrolling rights in various disputed areas. From the Chinese perspective, it is being argued that for India, restoration of patrolling rights even in Demchok and Depsang is somewhat of a diplomatic victory, and I think that has been acknowledged by many Indian strategists as well. However, what is important is that the Chinese side also feels that they have not really suffered any loss in this agreement, because the agreement is only about border patrol and not about sovereignty demarcation. The agreement actually means that, 2 years after achieving disengagement in 4 places with non-patrolled buffer zones, now we're going to have 2 more places where there will be cross-patrolled buffer zones, and these 2 places were specially demanded by India. So this is what this is how the Chinese side is interpreting the border patrol agreement, and they are of the opinion that the issue of border sovereignty is not involved in the border patrol agreement, and the border sovereignty issue has been handed over to the meeting mechanism of special representatives on the border issue, which has been restarted after a gap of 5 years. So it is this reshaping of the rules of engagement at the LAC that has formed the basis of progress in China-India bilateral negotiations. So now the question arises that what was the need for China or India to feel so compelled to conclude this border patrol agreement at that point in time? Of course, the possibility of Trump 2.0 or President Trump coming back to power and the uncertainty associated with it, this might have played an important role in both sides' calculations. But I think, the fundamental interests of China and India has been the key force in shaping the contours of this consequential relationship. From an Indian perspective, as we are all well aware of, and also Ambassador Kanta just mentioned, we know about China's manufacturing prowess and how dependent India as well as the whole world is on Chinese manufacturing. Just to, refer to India's Economic Survey 2024-25, it clearly highlights China's overwhelming manufacturing dominance in various sectors like electronic vehicles, critical minerals, and it stated very clearly how China's manufacturing output, which is now 45% of the global total, is at a level not seen since the UK or the US at their industrial peaks. So imagine how what a behemoth that China has become in terms of its manufacturing prowess. The survey also pointed out India's heavy dependence on Chinese supply chains, particularly for solar energy components and other, batteries, wafers, and things like that, which makes India particularly vulnerable to supply chain disruptions, price fluctuations, and currency risks. In recent months, also, we have seen news about China putting export control on rare earth magnets, fertilizers, tunnel boring machines. All of those have put unprecedented pressure on various Indian industries. And of course, there has been some interest in various industries within India to revive economic engagement with China after so many years of tension, of course, with caution. Now, as a China researcher and scholar, I also get to see firsthand how important the India relationship is to the Chinese side. If you follow the economic debates within China, you would know that how concerned they are about the sustainability of the Chinese economic model. So on one hand, given the severe overcapacity in China's domestic market, there is serious anxiety among Chinese businesses that if they do not go out, if they do not explore new markets, they are going to be out of business. On the other hand, China's access to global markets is shrinking by the day under the impact of intensifying great power competition. So this is making India a very critical market for Chinese businesses. Chinese businesses are increasingly convinced that going forward, India will be one of the only three big independent markets in the world after US and China, with its market size and development potential far ahead of other countries. What makes the Indian market particularly attractive for Chinese companies is that it is the only large market where local companies are still weak and the momentum of consumption upgrade is still very, very certain. So faced with such a huge market with such great economic potential, it is only natural that Chinese enterprises are very, very bullish about entering India or being in India. Because if they don't, others will, which will, in a way affect Chinese companies' global competitiveness. So this is the economic part of it. But apart from economics, politically too, India is very, very important for China. For China's very crucial goal of cross-strait reunification. Can it really happen without taking India into confidence? If you look at the Chinese discourse, it cannot happen. They need to take India into confidence. So that is the political part of it. On the other hand, I also see many debates within China where they admit how India's imperfect development trajectory has a greater appeal among developing countries or the countries of global south in comparison to China's flawless, daunting, economic achievements. The other countries in the global south, they feel India's economic model to be more relatable because it is those countries also face similar kind of challenges that India is facing. So that gives certain kind of credibility to the Indian development model in global south. And if India can align itself with China, that gives China far greater legitimacy, within the global south, in platforms like BRICS and SCO. So it is all these geopolitical considerations that has been pushing Beijing to have a more, productive, more conciliatory approach towards India. However, as Ambassador Kanta also mentioned, when it comes to China-India relations, caution is the key. China, which has for a very long time seen India as a retreating image in China's rear view mirror, has suddenly risen up to the strange India threat paradigm. If you look at China's internal discourse, if you look at their newspapers or what they're discussing, you can very easily see that, anxiety over India's economic progress, India's demographic dividend, particularly at a time when China itself is facing a serious population shrinkage.
2 more minutes, please.
Okay, I'm just finishing up.
Yes.
Just an article I read today about how they're debating whether India's advantage can actually help it overtake China in just one generation. So that kind of anxiety I could see there. So to be sure, China is going to make all efforts to prevent India from emerging as a competitor to China in the future, be it leveraging the border dispute, using South Asia, using export control, you name it, and they will definitely try to, prevent India from being a competitor. For us, of course, it is important to escape the trap, and for that, we have to be first and foremost clear-eyed about our own potential, our own place in the world, and also our place in China's scheme of things, which I think will place us in a more, favorable position to negotiate with Beijing. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Antara. It was very interesting that you've been following the Chinese media press, and some of the comments that you made are quite heartening, basically, that they find our imperfect model of development more appealing and perhaps more challenging to their own developmental model, at least something they can admit they can learn from India, which is quite good. And I fully agree with you that they would try to contain India within a certain strategic landscape and restrain India from being capable of challenging China. So that is definitely, as Ambassador Kanthan, yourself both have mentioned, that China will remain our major challenge. So let us see how it going forward plays out. Now we have Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar here, and sir, I would like to request you to kindly dwell on the other question I had asked Antara also to dwell, but because of time constraint, probably she couldn't. About how do you see the simultaneous outreach by the Chinese towards Pakistan, while they were also talking to us, not only in the SU context, but before and after, because from here Wang Yi went to Kabul and then had convergences, the trilateral, and then thereafter we saw. And secondly, what are your views on the developments, as everybody is talking about, that could RIC move forward at a greater pace than it has in the past? The floor is yours, sir. Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm audible now. Right,
Yes.
right. Yeah, thank you very much, Anil, and delighted to be here, and my compliments and thanks to Abhinav and to Yusanas for inviting me to this panel. I regret I was a little late, so I couldn't hear Ashok Kantha fully, but I was able to hear Antara, and as you mentioned, Anil, I'm sure what she has said would be a source of great encouragement, because normally, the discourse that we get in the Indian media and amongst the Indian scholars and in the Indian press is, they try to project and portray the Chinese as 10 feet tall and they can do no wrong, and everything that is happening is good. And maybe part of the reason is that they are behind sort of an iron curtain. Whatever is happening inside, it doesn't really come out. So in that sense, normally for other cases the speculation is negative, but in as far as China is concerned, whether the foreign minister is removed, the defense minister is removed, the rocket force is changed, or it is completely sent out, it does not garner all that much of sustained negative reporting as far as China is concerned. So I think it is good that we have these elements, and particularly I think as far as, and I will also briefly come to that China also needs India. India, of course, needs China, as we've been hearing. So, you asked me two questions, Anil. If you permit, I will quickly,
Surely, sir.
flag some of the issues, because the advantage of coming at the end is that much of what you wanted to say has already been said. So I will just highlight a few issues, flag a few issues without going into any great detail, and then at the end come and briefly focus on these two aspects of China India, China Pakistan, in the context of the rapprochement, normalization of ties with India. So first, I think, let me say, in terms of a couple of general comments, that there is a huge difference, I think everyone recognizes, between India and China, whether it is the size of their economies, in terms of the military capacity, capability. They have their military budget is about 3 times more than that of India. Even if you look at the size of the economy, of course, in nominal terms, the Chinese economy is about $19 odd trillion. We are about $4 odd trillion. So, about 1/5 of the Chinese economy, although in 1990s, both the economies were quite similar in terms of total GDP and per capita GDP also. But if you were to look at the purchasing power parity, then the difference is not all that much. The Chinese economy is about 40 trillion, and the Indian economy is in the range of about 17-18 trillion. So it's more than twice as much as India, not as much as 5 times. So I think, but still, there is great difference. There is, and this difference has been increasing. It has been growing. I think as both the economies have grown over the last 20-30 years, their capacities and capabilities and their ambitions and aspirations have also increased. And I think that has also resulted in greater friction, whether it is because they are coming across each other, whether it is on the line of actual control, whether it's on the border, or it is as far as our neighborhood is concerned, or it is the maritime region is concerned. There are greater friction. I think if we were to look at right from the beginning, there have been, the relationship has really been defined by strands of whether it is cooperation in some areas, limited areas. There is competition in other areas, but there is also confrontation in a large number of areas. And this confrontation has led to conflict also. I'm not talking only about 1962, that is what happened, but I think in more recent past, whether it was in 2013 when the Chinese forces came into India, 2014, September when Xi Jinping was visiting India, or whether it's Doklam or it is Galwan. So I think this friction has also increased. But I think we really have to see as to how, in the face of the changed circumstances, global circumstances, whether it is going to lead to greater friction or it is going to lead to greater cooperation. And I think it is what has happened in Tianjin, and I think also what Antara also mentioned, that the Chinese also feel the need that they want India. Well, maybe it'll be a far cry that India will never be a friend, but at least not let us put it in the category of an enemy, an adversary, a hostile power. At least if it can be, the relationship between India and the West, and particularly the United States, if that can be made a little weaker, that to that extent it will be better for them. As far as India is concerned, of course, India wants peace, tranquility on the border. That's a strategic necessity for us. We have to focus on our development, focus on getting better standards of living for our people, having a developed India by the 100th anniversary of our independence, having Viksit Bharat, etc. So Peace and tranquility on the border is an absolute sine qua non. Over these last 5 years, we've seen that notwithstanding that at the political level, the relationship was really at a standstill, notwithstanding that there were meetings between defense ministers a couple of times, foreign ministers, NSAs of the two countries, but trade continued to increase. So I think this has its own momentum, it has its own dynamism. I think we really have to see, because there are huge dependencies as has been spoken about. But I was reading some report some time ago that although this is increasing, it is also because India's own manufacturing, maybe not in a percentage of its GDP, because our GDP has been growing, but in absolute terms, its manufacturing has been growing, our exports have been growing, and so the imports of the trade deficit that occurs, the import of raw materials and intermediate products coming to India is much greater, and in fact it is the finished products, final products, that the import has come down. I think if India is dependent upon China, there are those dependencies. I think China also very much depends on India, and I agree with what Antara had said, that there is this overcapacity that has been built in the Chinese economy, and so far since 2000, when it became a member of the WTO, of course, it has seen that all this products, the manufacturers and goods, they were really going out to the US, they were going out to the West. But of late, over the last, particularly after COVID, there is this focus on stable, resilient supply chains. There is this focus on de-risking, not exactly decoupling from China, but de-risking and having a China plus one strategy. So in that sense, they find that India being politically stable, economically growing country, it is has the greatest potential. So they need to reach out to India. They need to accommodate India in some way or the other, and not project it, not keep it out, not project it as a hostile power or as an adversary. Now, as far as in the title of this seminar, it is the word reset is used. I have difficulty with that, because I don't think it is any sort of reset. There is not a move towards a grand bargain of any sort, because I don't think there was any offering that was coming from China. There was no offering being made by India, whether it is on Taiwan or even on any of the other issues that China might have wanted. But this is really moved towards normalization, towards stabilization, something that India definitely needs, and I think something that China also needs. In my view, the Prime Minister would definitely have gone even otherwise, to take forward the Kazan process, which commenced in October last year. And so, basically to show our interest that we are also keen to have stable borders. But of course, what Mr. Trump did in terms of imposing all these tariffs, that made it absolutely imperative for Prime Minister Modi to go. And whatever were the images that were coming out from Tianjin, they were important in the sense of sending out a message, sending out a signal. But if as many of the media houses seem to project that this is a new axis that is developing or evolving, I think that was very far off the mark. As I said, the China also realizes, earlier what the reportage that we hear is, what we see is that earlier there used to be all this salami slicing that used to take place as far as Indian borders are concerned. But of late, any such attempts they have been there has been a pushback against that. So I did mention about Doklam, Galwan, etc. And I think also India's action in terms of the manner in which it has stood its ground on continuing to import oil from Russia, on not condemning Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. Also, the manner in which it has stood firm against these threats from Mr. Trump in terms of imposing more this additional tariffs. I think that has maybe possibly sent out a message also to China, as it has, I'm sure, to other countries in the world, that India will stand its ground when its interests are challenged. And as I said, India has, in Tianjin, India did not dilute its stand on any of its positions on the major issues. India also did not attend the parade. Of course, that was never, expected that India would attend, but not the Prime Minister, not even a representative from our embassy in Beijing attended that parade. Now, very quickly, coming to the two questions that you have mentioned, Anil, I think as far as relations with China are concerned, I think they, as I said, India cannot be, in that sense, a friend as far as China is concerned. While for us also, we will try to normalize relations, we'll try to stabilize relations. But there is such a huge trust deficit. There are so many issues, whether not only the boundary issue, not only the support that China provides to Pakistan, whether it is, not only in terms of the CPEC that it provided, Op Sindoor we have spoken about, also in terms of, more than 80% of Pakistan's armory defense equipment comes from China. Support in the UN Security Council in terms of blocking, designation of terrorists, etc. So I think the relationship with Pakistan, as they say, it's sweeter than honey. It is deeper than oceans and higher than mountains, and it is iron strong, etc. But leave those adjectives aside. But I think it is, this is really, Pakistan has become a strategic extension of China in my assessment. So I don't think we can compare relations of India with China to that of China with Pakistan. They are absolutely a class apart. We have to continue to focus on our own strengths. As far as the RIC is concerned, I don't think it has any hope of being realized, not in the short term, not even in the medium term, for all the reasons that have been mentioned. Border, Pakistan, trade, the Tibet question. Look at the manner in which China tries to encircle India, not allow it to play its legitimate role in regional or global affairs, its objections to India's membership of the UNSC, its objection to India's membership of the NSG, etc., etc. So the whole works. So I think the trust deficit is too deep. Whatever Russia might say, our relations with Russia are strong, are vibrant, and they will continue to be so. But I think RIC, and RIC in any case was, at that time meeting at the level of the foreign ministers. It has, if I remember correctly, never met at the level of the leaders as such. So I don't think even at the foreign minister level or even at other levels, senior official level, I don't think we can really agree to anything of that nature going forward. So the final word I would say is that, there is friction between the two sides, volatility between the two sides that has really characterized the relationship between India and China. As their capacities, as their capabilities, as their economic military strength grows, I think that is likely to continue. The challenge for both the countries is, in my view, going to be how to manage that relationship so that neither does China want a confrontation on our borders. Definitely, India does not want a confrontation on our borders. India had made that very clear even in 2014 when Xi Jinping had come in September. I think on the Chinese side also, there is that recognition that we need to work together with India, and that is why you would see when Prime Minister Modi was there, he met not only Xi Jinping but one of the senior Politburo members of the Chinese Communist Party, Kai Shi. So I think at some level there seems to be that recognition that we need to develop this relationship, this conversation, this dialogue with India, so that there is a stability in our ties. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for very detailed analysis. You rightly mentioned that we have to learn to manage the relationship, and I think that is clearly the intent. And Prime Minister very clearly had said that we are development partners. I mean, that is something which is
not rivals but partners.
Not rivals, but we are partners. So that is something that will go ahead. And of course, what has emerged during the discussions today is that China has begun to realize that that India counts. And it is in their interest to develop good ties with India, not only in our interest to do so. Of course, dependencies are there, but we are also moving forward to reduce those dependencies to a great extent while trying to leverage as much as we can the relationship with China. And China will remain a strategic challenge for India going forward, and we can't take our eyes off from there. That is quite sure. And of course, Ambassador Kanta, yourself, and Antara all agree that RIC and the Pak factor will continue, and RIC will remain where it is at the moment, despite the Russian intent, basically, not more than the Chinese. So this is indeed one thing that we have mentioned is that, in my view also, I believe that neither China nor India really want a longish war or a war per se. Both sides may be aiming to get at least 15 to 20 years of peace and tranquility so that we can reach our Viksit Bharat at 2047 objective, and Chinese can get there in 2049. And there's the Goldman Sachs and has come out with a study that will be the two powers with very little differential that you mentioned about 20 in the 90s or late 80s, a very similar kind of GDP that we had. So I think we might head there if all goes well. For that, peace and tranquility is absolutely important. So that's a welcome development, and let's see how it plays out. If there are any questions, we'll be very happy to. We have about 10 minutes. Abhinav, are you there?
Ambassador Triguna, there's a question in the chat box. Should I
Can you read
for
out, please? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, please.
Just a moment. Okay. So the question is from Anil Jaising. He
Come
stated
on.
that the world is heading towards a China-Russia axis, directly challenging the US economically, including de-dollarization. While India is willing to go along with these two countries to empower the global south and show its strategic autonomy, it is sensibly stopping short of taking on the US. However, if Trump's erratic policies further alienate the China-Russia element, China will try and draw India away from its perceived pro-US land. How should India guard itself from being sucked into a China-Russia-led axis with countries like North Korea, Iran and Pakistan, etc.? Given half a chance, China will try to dominate India, and we, instead of energizing ourselves to be the preferred +1, we are now actually encouraging Chinese investment into India and increasing the trade imbalance with China. Are we absolutely clear or where we stand, and do we have the national capacity to withstand the pressures?
So Ambassador Kanta and then Ambassador Sajanhar both can comment on this.
Well, it's quite a long question. No, let me just mention that what is needed at present is a strategic clarity, because we have a world in churn. We have a situation where a lot of things we took for granted. For instance, upward trajectory in India-US relations, which was sort of unfolding for last 27 years. Suddenly, we see a lot of stress and strain. In fact, we should look very carefully on US relations with China and Russia also. It's not so sort of open and shut kind of situation that there is a China-Russia axis which is seeking to counter USA. Yes, I mean, there is a strategic contestation for hegemony or preeminence between USA and China, no doubt about it, that's happening. But it's a fairly, complex scene. For instance, USA under Donald Trump in his second administration has in fact jettisoned the policy of dual containment of China and Russia. He is seeking normalization of relations with Russia, though Putin is playing hardball, but his preference will be moving towards more normal relations with Russia. Likewise, with China also, you would have seen the trajectory of engagement between China and USA over last few months. USA imposed a tariff of 145% on China. China retaliated with tariff of up to 125% and series of other steps, including denial of export of rare earth magnets, and they came to a truce, sort of trade truce, which in fact extends also to some extent review of policy on export control. Some of the semiconductor items, advanced semiconductors, they were denying to China earlier, they are now willing to provide to China. Trump is seriously interested in a deal with China later this year. Whether that happens or not, one doesn't know, because there are so many imponderables. So let's not, lull ourselves into a belief that somehow, China and Russia are sort of so inexorably positioned against USA that everything is set in stone. It's not like that. Actually, it's a fairly fluid situation. It's a situation in flux. What we need here is really to assess the current geopolitical trends carefully, with clarity, show both strategic patience. We can't really jump to conclusions that, okay, we are finding problems with USA, so let's now move closer to Russia and China. In real world, things don't happen like that, or even deviating from a strategic autonomy. So I think strategic clarity, strategic patience, strategic autonomy is required here. This has to be done very carefully, without falling in these sort of stereotypes of Russia-China axis against USA, because there are gray areas there.
Yes, that's true. In fact, the Chinese seem to like India, and so does Russia, that India has a strategic autonomy. They quite prefer it, actually. So, Ambassador Sajana.
Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, excellent question, because I think that has really been in the global press, global media, and this is what I'm sure China and also Russia would like to project, after the images coming out of Tianjin, that, this is a new axis that is evolving, this is a new axis that is developing. I think as far as China is concerned, their only interest in Tianjin from, whatever happened, is to send out a message to the world that, the Trump's tariffs are the only game in the world. And these three countries have got together basically to stand up against those tariffs strongly. But of course, as far as India and China are concerned, as we've been discussing the whole evening, there are so many other issues. That is why you would have seen that even the Chinese ambassador here in India, meaning he was able to so categorically say that, this is acting like a bully, and, we stand fully with India on that. So it is basically they wanted to, the effort is to weaken the link between India and the United States, and in that sense to bring down the solidarity also as far as the Quad is concerned. We have not discussed the Quad at all today. That's an important element also. So maybe Abhinav can take it forward in our future discussion. So that is number one. The second point I would like to make is, as we have said, that, China is the most formidable challenge as far as India is concerned. India's defense strategy, military strategy, or foreign policy, it is the biggest challenge. I think the biggest opportunity, in my view, is our relations with the United States. And because everything that we need in terms of, whether it is trade, of course, there are problems that we are facing today in terms of trade, but in terms of, whether it is technology, whether it is capital, whether it is markets, our diaspora, geopolitics, you name it, I think, and I don't want to emphasize on the aspect of values and so on and so forth, but that is our partner. Let us not conflate Trump with America, because Trump is there today. We have to manage him. We have to manage, and I think things have started moving already. In my view, there are positive noises being made both from Washington and Delhi, and hopefully, I think Trump has also seen that India will stand firm and will not capitulate against its coercion. So hopefully there will be, something that is mutually acceptable, something that will come out of it. So, and even as there are these problems on tariffs, the other issues on India-US relations, we've been talking about this Yuddhabhyas, the exercises in Alaska that are taking place, the 2+2 intersectional dialogue that has taken place, the visit of this very senior delegation of the defense policy group that has come to India. So I think those other elements of the relationship with the United States, they are proceeding. And if trade also comes, of course, there are question marks, the trust issue, can you going forward trust the US and trust the United States again? So I think those are issues we will have to handle. The final point here I would like to make is that although in the national security strategy in 2017, the United States had said that China is also the strategic competitor for the United States. It is a country which has the capacity and the will and the intention to challenge America's leadership in the world. And so at that time, that is why the Quad had been revived and Pacific Command had been made, the Indo-Pacific Command, etc., etc. So I don't think it might, its attempts to accommodate China, its attempts to reach out to China, that might be there. But whether will Trump be willing to sort of, either share power as a G2 with China, I think that is a moot point. Again, that is something that we can discuss going forward, or it will definitely not give up on its own place at the helm of affairs to let China contest it and to replace it. So I think that sort of partnership between India and the United States, that is a strategic requirement for the countries, and I think that will definitely continue to be at play. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir,
Thank you for
just
joining.
a very small question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me, sir? Sir, I have a few observations and a small question. Maybe if someone can. So I feel that either India is being just reactive without negotiating on some concrete deliverables. So given that, I would like to mention that in the recent India-Pakistan war, China provided critical and real-time intelligence to Pakistan. Now, with this detente between India and China, can we guarantee that if there is a future situation, a war-like situation between India and Pakistan, will China at least refrain from providing such intelligence or operational support to Pakistan? And given what has happened in Bangladesh, it's something very critical that if there's a future war-like situation, India will not just face it on the Western front, but India is likely to face an ugly situation on the Eastern front also with the Bangladesh, and also affiliated internal security problems also, particularly related to Islamist radicalization and sponsored and I would say orchestrated by the Pakistan-based handlers. And in that scenario, if again China has the same attitude of support towards Pakistan, it's difficult, and once again, like in that situation, because given a strained situation with Americans, we cannot expect to hope any kind of support or favorable attitude from Americans. And if Americans are also very pro-Pakistan in the next conflict, then I guess we are headed for a tough time. And my second observation is that given the way things have unfolded in Bangladesh, or let's say Sri Lanka or in Nepal, like, there are a lot of theories prevailing that the American deep state or the CIA is behind these little petty revolutions or anarchic coups and all. And there's some sort of a contestation going on between the China and the US. But what I feel is that Mr. Donald Trump, or even like the American, the presidents before him also, they are more towards finding a modus vivendi with China. And the way the Chinese have reacted to what has happened in Bangladesh or even in Nepal doesn't show that that they are on a path towards contestation with the US. Both the powers, they are acting like mature global powers, and they seem to be like mulling over sharing, demarcating areas of spheres of influence, something like that. So are we, and as a country, I mean, India is India getting trapped in this global power politics because economically we don't have those capabilities? Technologically, we don't have those capabilities to match up to these big powers. And with all this gung-ho about the recent detente and rapprochement and the multipolarization and India being an emerging economy, I mean, I just want to know whether we are introspecting or not, or yeah.
I'm quite sure we are not only introspecting, but we are prepared to deal with that. I mean, that is there very much so. And Abhinav, you very well know that everything doesn't come out in the public domain. And most of us talk from the public domain, essentially, try to comment on that and make some sense out of it. But I'll request Ambassador Kanta to take this. What does he feel about this situation? Of course, Pakistan will remain, and as been mentioned earlier, Pakistan is going to be, is an extension of, is another state of China. So it doesn't matter, they will, and I don't know, why are we surprised that China really, shared the real-time intelligence information? Why should you be surprised about it? If it had not happened, then you would be surprised, in my view. And
no, we are not surprised. I mean, I'm not.
It is normal. It will continue to be there. It's a given. So, Ambassador Kanta, please, sir, would you like to comment?
Actually, I'll just make two brief points here, because I think we are already running out of time. One is that, as far as nature of support given by China to Pakistan during a recent conflict with India, it was very different, qualitatively very different, and it has created a new situation. Whenever we have future conflict with Pakistan, we'll have to work on the assumption that this theater will be extended in scope, and China will be an element, a powerful element, providing support to Pakistan from behind the scene, which changes, deterrence dynamics vis-a-vis both China and Pakistan very significantly. We should raise it with China, no doubt about it. In fact, I have written publicly that we should convey to China that this kind of pattern of behavior has a cost in terms of impact on India-China relations. But we should have absolutely no illusions that China will continue this position, because you need to look at a kind of strategic nexus which has existed between China and Pakistan over the years, which has extended to China providing full support to Pakistan's nuclear weapon program, possibly even testing a nuclear weapon for Pakistan, its missile program. Even now it's happening. So expecting that China will stop it just because we are demonstrating will be unrealistic. It's not going to happen. So we have to factor it in. When we assess China, we need to factor in that this is nature of the beast. This is what they're doing to our interests vis-a-vis Pakistan. Now coming to Pakistan, USA and China carving out some kind of sphere of influence. I don't know, they're dealing with each other in a mature fashion. I'm not too sure about it. In fact, there is complete lack of clarity on what is basic strategic stance of USA under second Trump administration. It is very different from what he pursued in first Trump administration. We are all struggling to understand that. Now, sphere of influence presupposes that others don't have agency. Do you expect countries like India and Japan and Vietnam will agree to sort of USA handing over a part of the world to China on a platter as part of its influence? It's not. In fact, they have only limited capacity today to shape outcomes. Others have agency. There is much greater dispersal of economic, diplomatic, political and military power today than what was the case earlier. So we have agency. We can shape outcomes, and we don't need to get too perturbed about this possibility of a G2 emerging between USA and China.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Antara, you wanted to just come in quickly?
I wanted to quickly come in on the Pakistan question.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, sir. You say that Pakistan-China nexus, why is it coming as a surprise? Of course, it is like the battlefield collusion and all. That's a new trend. But Pakistan-China nexus in two front has been a constant. Like I have grown up hearing this two front challenge, right? So now the thing is, what the new trend that I see is somewhat it's like a counter trend, where China-US competition over Pakistan is heating up. And it is true that for long Pakistan has deftly managed its relationship with both US and China, but now with US-China competition, becoming its peaking, Pakistan's position is not it's finding it difficult to balance its relation with both China and the United States. I'm in fact writing a piece on how China has been outraging about Pakistan's signing shady deals with the United States at China's cost, and there is a lot of mistrust, confusion that is happening within this triangle, US, China, and Pakistan. And I think this is something that we need to watch very, very closely and use it in our interest. So I just thought I'll highlight that.
I fully agree with you there. Only thing I would say is that, and I have maintained it, that somehow Pakistanis know how to encash their nuisance value. They have done it with China, they have done it with the US, they have done it with Russia because of their strategic location, which is there. Yesterday or day before yesterday, they signed the rare earths deal with USA. So this is all going on. I mean, we'll have to see how it goes forward because that's a rentier estate. So it's much more easier for them to work on that. But we look forward to read your article on that. I'll pass the baton back to Abhinav. And I want to just thank Ambassador Kanta, Dr. and Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar for such phenomenal analysis that we heard today. And we are quite sure that the South Bloc is also working in tandem with our thoughts to a great extent. Abhinav, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, sir, for your sharing your thoughts and for moderating this event, sir. And also my heartfelt thanks to Ambassador Kantha for joining our event. I think this is your first lecture and first participation, but we look forward to engaging you more often and also invite you to Udaipur for our annual Maharana Pratap annual Geopolitics dialogue, which we organize in collaboration with the Ministry of External Affairs. And we're really honored to have you today with us. Also, my sincere thanks to Ambassador Sajjan Har, again, a member of our advisory board, and he has been a regular participant in many of our events, offline and online events both. Antara, thanks to you also for sharing your thoughts. I learned many new perspectives, and I would like to invite you in the future also. Oh, and also my sincere thanks to all the participants who joined us today. So with this, we come to the end of our today's session, and we will be organizing many more interesting sessions because we are living in very interesting times. Every day we have a new surprise. Yesterday it was Nepal. Today, I think France is boiling. Tomorrow, let's see what's happening. And geopolitics is becoming like a hot cake. A lot of people, including the astrologers and including the mystics, are jumping into the field. Sometimes their predictions are better than what analysts are saying. That's what I've come across. Yeah. So an exciting world is there, definitely. And once again, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Bye.